Welcome back to Beholder to No One, a D&D podcast. Today, Greg and I are here with Riley.
Hello.
From Four Nerds and a DM.
Yes, I was waiting for you to try and pronounce it and inevitably mispronounce the acronym. It's just FORNAD.
FORNAD.
Or FORNAD.
Yep.
And he's here today to talk to us about DMing and the differences between DMing a normal, like at the table game, and DMing in an actual play game.
Which there's quite a difference. I know a lot of people who listen to D&D podcasts don't think there's a difference. I know I didn't when I started, and man, you could tell that we were heavily influenced when we started our podcast by a couple other things.
Yeah, and I've learned from researching and listening to other people's episodes and things like that versus our own games. It's very much a performance art. You need to be a little bit more proactive and more think ahead of time and react. And you have to describe what you're doing. You need to make sure that people can see what you see because they're not going to be able to tell what you see on the map in front of you. So it's a little bit extra.
That is where I think we have a pretty decent advantage is because we don't play in person. We mostly play through Discord without being in person. So it's always just an audio medium for us. Mm-hmm. It'll always just be us trying to describe things and making sure everyone's got a clear picture. So I think once you get into the episodes where we started recording from Discord, which are much, much better in quality than if you listen to the first 10 or 12 episodes, I don't remember how many, where we recorded by going to my friend Stormy's house and just putting a phone on the table.
It's one way to do it.
Yeah, we didn't even record the person calling in from Discord's audio separately. So he just sounds like a robot for that entire episode. Entire first episode.
I will definitely be listening to that.
It's bad, and I'm sorry for that.
I mean,
I really like the quality of my podcast now, but I'm willing to admit that the first 12 episodes are not great.
Hey, you got to start somewhere.
Having listened to the first episode and listened to part of the last episode just to hear the quality change, there is a difference. So there is improvement, but the first episode was funny enough to keep me interested. So I will say that.
I think I have a particular distaste for the first episode because I've listened to it so many times.
That is fair.
Because, for one, I was there. And then, two, I had to edit it. Because I edit all of our podcasts for now. Recently, Chris has taken up some of that. He plays... God, who does he fucking play? He switches characters so goddamn often.
Who does that sound like, Nikki?
My husband.
Yes.
He's played Galvin, Fairtrader, and Baldric thus far. He's a great guy, but man, he switches characters often.
Yeah, I try not to switch characters unless I'm have a reason to leave the story.
Well,
if the story is going a way I don't want, then I'll be like, look, my character's retiring, or she needs to step back because you guys are going a darker path, and she's lawful good, and this is not a good mix, and she has no reason to stay.
He had a very good reason to retire, Galvin, which is he became the king of Fenderwinter, which is the combination of Phandalin and Neverwinter.
That would be a good reason.
Yeah.
I'm a king now. I can't adventure anymore.
Yeah.
I have people to do that for me.
So he became the drunken former monk Baldric, who doesn't have a last name.
You only need one.
Share. So what is your experience with DMing and gaming overall? Not just with actual play, but just overall.
Well, one, I just want to get this out there. There's absolutely several different ways you can DM, and I prefer to be a much more story-heavy DM rather than mechanics-heavy DM. And those don't have to conflict, but they really do for me. So I will often find myself being one of those people where one of my players is all like, but the rules say, and I'm like, I make the rules here. And slam my fist down on the table.
Dice and pieces go everywhere.
Yeah.
Greg and I are both very much rulers.
Yeah.
Though in the game that I run, there have been so many situations where I'm just like, that sounds cool. Sure, why not?
Well, if you listen to my podcast, you'll see there's a consistent thread of me being like, this is a cool idea mechanically and story-wise, but it does not fit particularly well within the realm of Dungeons and Dragons, so I do a lot of finagling.
Mhm.
Like recently, we released the Toy Maker arc, which is the party got kidnapped by this dude who's implanting them with all kinds of cool shit. Like Nick gets his eyes replaced with the corpses of fairies, so now he doesn't have dark vision, but he can always see magic.
What?
That's cool shit.
That's pretty
Yeah.
cool shit. Yeah, definitely.
A constant detect magic.
Yeah, but it got rid of his dark vision, and I believe he also always sees in black and white. Was another interesting thing that happened.
That is cool.
That was one of my favorite arcs, and it's such a shame because halfway through we lost all of the audio for it, so we had to re-record those episodes.
Oh, that sucks.
We do give a pretty heavy disclaimer that, like, hey, these are not the original versions, but none of my players remember exactly what happened anyway, other than a few cue beats that we're keeping exactly the same for the sake of the overarching story. But this is essentially the first time they've gone through it, but still, just be warned, like, we do that. I don't want to just pretend like that's all the first time we've done it.
And that's completely fair, and honestly, like, I don't remember what happened last week versus what happened, like, 12 hours. Like, I have to have notes and notes and notes reminding me what the hell happened in my own games.
Yeah, you'd think they'd remember what happened when they got, like, their arms cut off and replaced with fucking grappling hooks, but they didn't.
That part I would remember, but the little details that got me there, maybe not.
Yeah, no, it was one of my favorite arcs, and it was very homebrew. So, like, that is where I come from as a DM, is very homebrew. There's also a sci-fi arc we did, which is a completely different cast of characters set in the breaking point, which is where 4 territories meet in space, and that was an entire, like, system I built from the ground up.
Oh, cool.
It's not a very good system, but it is a system I built.
D&D in space is always fun.
It is always fun. I kept the Roll20 system, so it's just all D20 based, essentially, but it's very simplified in the way the stats are built. There's no leveling up, just shopping was one of the things I focused on as a way to keep everything balanced, is that, like, everything just stays the same power level, and you can increase your abilities and whatnot by buying upgrades at the store.
What were you saying, Greg?
I was going to say that, yes, I agree that D&D in space is enjoyable. However, the singular and solo game that I played, where we did Starfinder, was fun. It was super enjoyable up until we got into space. Like with the space battle, like the ship battles.
To be
It was
fair,
a lot of fun up to that point, and then I wanted to claw my fucking eyes out. It was so horrible.
To be fair, that was with a new DM and a new system.
Yes, it was.
So there was a little bit of a bumpy transition, but Starfinder is an amazing game.
Yeah, again, I loved it up until that point.
Yeah, I would recommend to any new DMs who are looking to get into more sci-fi stuff to try out a pre-existing game like Starfinder rather than building your own from scratch. Mine was very broken. I didn't even realize until the first playtest that I didn't have anything for armor class, like to determine whether or not I was hitting my players.
There are books out there as well. There's D20 Future. That might be a beneficial book for space games or futuristic games, or D20 Apocalypse, D20 Modern. Like, there's a bunch of those types of books out there that do offer more things that are based in a D20 plus or D20 world.
Yeah. Sorry for getting us super off topic.
No, you're fine.
Essentially what I'm trying to say is, like, my experience DMing has been homebrewing what I would call real cool shit and incorporating that, like, story-wise very well into my stories, but mechanically having a lack of understanding on a lot of the wider swaths of D&D's finer mechanics, which I think is totally valid for a DM. Like, there's a saying out there that the player's handbook is not a list of rules, it's a list of guidelines. But, like, I do not want to... I'm from my standpoint from here is that I'm a very story-centered DM, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with being a mechanic-focused DM or a combat-focused DM or player, for that matter. Like, all 3 of those are still valid options.
Yeah,
so
to each their own.
I've mentioned before in the podcast, but you also learn and grow, and what you start off as a DM may not be what you become once you're comfortable with DMing. For example, when I started DMing, I very much was a stick to the book. If the book doesn't specify that I can do that, you couldn't do it. Like, there was no ifs, ands, or buts. So I actually had people who've been playing for a really long time, and even though I had played for a while before I took up the DM mantle, I was not comfortable and confident enough to just go with the flow. And they're like, I want to seduce them. Nope, sorry, it doesn't say you could seduce them. Sorry, no, that's not an option. And they're like, just make it up. And I'm like, I don't understand. It doesn't specify that you can seduce the dragon. Therefore, you can't seduce the dragon.
I'm lucky enough that a bard has never crossed my table yet.
Are you looking for any players?
Well, right now, I think I have mentioned on Twitter, so it doesn't really matter if I say it here. We've since ended the campaign that is currently airing and have moved on to the next one where I'm not DMing anymore. I've handed that over to Chris because he wanted to try DMing, and I'm playing a bard now.
Nice.
And so is one of my friends, Casey. She's playing a bard.
So you get to seduce everything.
My friend Casey, who's also playing a bard. After we're done, I'll share with you the makeup of our party because it is absolutely horrible. But I don't want to ruin that for anyone who might listen to the podcast one day.
Fair.
But she's also playing a bard.
You don't have to be a bard to seduce the dragon, by the way. You could be a sorcerer.
She is very much the seduce everything that walks type of bard. My character likes to flirt a lot, but he's not going to go much farther than that. And I just thought of bard because that is the D&D meme when you said you cannot 100%. Seduce the dragon.
By the way, you could always seduce a dragon.
You can always try.
Yeah.
And fail, probably. You can still try.
Unless it's a feral dragon,
you'll die in the process.
I threw that at one of my parties when they were getting way too cocky. They were like, oh, we could take anything. And I was like, all right, well, here's a fucking ancient bronze dragon who's lost its fucking mind and has gone completely feral.
Go. Roll initiative.
And they were like, well, fuck.
What level were they at that point?
I believe they were like level 17.
Oh, okay. So at least they were up there. All right. It wasn't like 5th level characters that you were like, oh, take that, sons of bitches.
Oh, hell no. I care about my players and do not actively try and kill them. I don't think that's the purpose of a DM, and there are people out there who disagree with me. I do not see it as being player versus DM. It is very much the players and the DM working together to tell an interesting story. And I think that specific style of playing in an actual play podcast lends itself very well to the podcast side because you're trying to entertain an audience.
Yeah.
But I could probably see the benefits of being one of those DMs that's like, all right, motherfuckers, you guys all have level 20 players, and we're gonna run through the fucking like Tomb of Horrors or whatever.
That would be a fun one shot.
That would be a really fun one shot.
Makes note to self. I used to be very much a DM versus the player when I first started because that's what I thought it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And
again, I do want to specify that it's totally valid to play that way if that is how everyone has agreed to play.
That's fine, yeah. And I do have a tendency to make my games very difficult. And to the point where some of my friends who I have DM'd for, they're like, oh no, this is normal if you die in Nikki's games. And I'm like, I didn't mean to kill you. But now I've gotten a little bit better where I'm trying to like get away from that and find ways around it. Like my Monday game that's coming up, I'm supposed to kill 2 people. They should die. They are 2 people versus a adult green dragon, which is a hard encounter for the 5 of them. But something happened where 2 people went through this teleportation hand door that was there, and then someone dispelled magic on the door, and now nobody can teleport.
Oh, nice.
That is.
They didn't. My goal originally was everybody touches the door, gets teleported to the dragon, everybody fights the dragon, and then they find the item that they wanted. I didn't expect them to dispel the damn door, and they're like, "Oh, it's fine. They're probably in a cell." And I'm just like, can you 2 make new characters just in case? No reason.
Oh, I've definitely said that to people before. It's a great intimidation tactic at the very least to be like, hey, you might want to make a backup character just in case.
Yeah, for sure.
I think I might have a way to get them out of it. So I'm going to try to do that method because I don't want them to die just because of someone casting Dispel Magic. Because in theory, yes, that was a good idea if it was a trap, which is what they thought it was.
The way I try and do it, and people may see this as me cheating in favor of the party, but I'm totally okay with killing people, like party member characters, but I just want it to be fair. I don't want it to be like a cheap death.
Yeah.
That's why I don't do a lot of like pits that if you fall into you die, or I don't do a lot of like super hard fights. In one scene that's coming up, a character is like about to die. Like in my podcast that's yet to be released, I'm trying to keep spoilers for this stuff minimal. But there's a character who's about to die, and I give them a chance to roll against a save that I've literally never given anyone else a chance to roll against. But if I didn't give him this chance, he would just die super cheap and unfairly. So I figured I might as well give him the chance, and that's just how it is sometimes.
I think if the dice deem it necessary, then sure, like death is inevitable. And I have killed 2 players specifically, or 3 players, but each of those times, 2 of them was when they left the game. So it was purely for flavor, just to explain why they left. And one of them was because the person wanted a new character. So we killed their first character so the second character could join. But that was mostly because the character wasn't really meshing well with the party. They were lawful good and everybody else was like neutral and chaotic-ish. And they were on a pirate ship, and it was like, hey, we're going to go raid that ship over there. And that person's like, no, we need to save them. And I'm just like, okay, do you want to make a new character? Do you want to keep it and make it work out? This is completely up to you. We can keep going. If you're not having fun, though.
That is another thing that I think is super important with podcasts, is making sure all of the characters like mesh, so that
yes,
when you have your characters act in character, you're not going to cause like a problem. And if you listen to my podcast, you'll see that this is a thing that happens in the first episode. The Arashi, Stormy's character. Stormy shouldn't have had a character as the DM. That was one of our problems with him. But Stormy's character, Arashi, burns down Nick's church. Nick was our cleric.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the end of the first episode.
I was very confused by that part.
We do not, like, mesh with Arashi for so long, until the point... Stormy actually left the show a while ago, because he just didn't think that this is how D&D would be, which is totally fair. He wanted a different D&D experience, and we weren't meshing with the way he wanted it to go, so he decided to leave. We're totally fine with that. So his character left, and after that, it was like such a smooth sailing without that character that meshed so hard with the rest of our characters.
I've had that happen in a game, too. We had one player that was just very much wanted to be the center of attention and wanted very much a, quote, Lord of the Rings game, where everybody else was like, this is for fun. And most of us wanted a jokey game that wasn't super serious. There were still serious parts, but we all were very much like silly. So the way that I think it was worded was, you're turning my Lord of the Rings game into a Monty Python game. And all of us were like, that sounds amazing.
Hell yeah.
But
I think I've seen that meme. where it's just like the picture of the Fellowship of the Ring. It's like how most D&D adventures begin, and then it's a picture of Monty Python. Yes. It's like how most D&D adventures end.
Yep. So he left, and the game is so much smoother now. Like, no offense to him, he was a fun player. He just wanted a different style than the rest of us.
Yeah, and it's totally fair if like someone's not meshing with like the rest of the group, like character wise, for them to develop a new character to do that. Or if they're just really not meshing with you as a group, for them to go and find their own group.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it is about a group of people having fun trying to tell a silly story together, or a serious story together, or whatever.
Yeah, I like serious games sometimes, but it needs to be like the right time and place, and you need to have the right group for it.
I honestly think that the best way to play D&D is to try and tell a serious story with silly characters, because then you can still get those like down to earth, like heartfelt moments between two people who are like just trying their best.
Mm-hmm.
But then you also have fucking Tickles the Dragonborn trying to fucking pickpocket somebody in the background, and it's...
Is that a character? Is that an actual character, Tickles the Dragonborn?
It is not.
Oh, it should be.
It is now.
No.
It's going to be my next character.
But I've killed off some characters throughout the current run of our podcast from what has aired. I killed off my own character. That sucked.
Sounds like it would.
I don't know if you remember my character, Nikki.
I don't remember. I don't know
I played
names to people. or characters to people?
I played Darius Deersend. He's a centaur fighter.
Okay.
And the reason his name is Deersend is because he was more deer-shaped than horse-shaped, like size-wise. So the other centaurs started calling him like he's got the end of a deer rather than the end of a horse. And I really loved that character. But I firmly believe that the DM should not have a player character in the party. Like, I think that can cause like some problems, like balance-wise, when
for sure.
that player character might end up knowing stuff that the party shouldn't.
Yeah.
Like, NPCs that travel with the party are totally fine.
Right.
But you should not have a player character, which is why at the end of our first arc, Darius sacrifices himself to save the rest of the party, and the entire second arc is them trying to find a way to bring him back and going to their own adventure.
We added an NPC to our game because we were down a player, so we only had 3 people, and we discussed it and we're like, hey, are you guys cool with somebody running 2 players or 2 characters so we can have a comfortable party of 4? And I didn't want to run them for that specific reason, but also as like, I'm doing a lot as the DM. So it's like, can somebody else run this? So we have our ranger who also runs their wife, which is a bard. That was an NPC that was added to the game. So it was a lot of fun. But it was super cute. And she doesn't play a super major role in the RP purposes, but it does add a little bit of cutesiness to the story. And he does role play it very well. When like somebody's in danger, they immediately help each other out because they're spouses.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They help their party out too.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of a lot of the NPCs that have become regulars on my podcast. My party is a big fan of Greg the Bandit.
Yeah. Oh, not me. Okay, sorry, I got excited.
So Greg was in the first arc during my first ever episode DMing, which is episode 9. They tie him up because he ambushes them along the road with like a bunch of goblins, and they kill all the goblins and they tie him up, and they're like, "You're coming with us. You're gonna help us defeat your boss." And he's like, "All right, I should give you a name for initiative purposes then. It's Gregory." And he's become like the child of the party now. Like everyone fucking loves him.
Damn right. Finally, somebody with my namesake is doing something with their lives.
So what systems do you play? Do you play 5th edition and homebrew stuff?
We play 5th edition D&D mostly because that is what we have access to via D&D Beyond and the books that we own. We'd probably really enjoy getting into some other stuff. We've played what I call Breaking Point, which is that space game I made. We've recorded 3 arcs of that, like three like story arcs of that. But we've lost all of the second one, which sucks because it was a zombie apocalypse thing where they like crash landed on a planet that is overrun by zombies, and it's so good, and it has one of my favorite moments, but we'll never get to see it aired. Aww. Which is where Ted, which is Ben's character, he's just a like fucking taxi driver, is not paying attention at all. And there's this crazy scientist dude holding a vial of something, threatening to inject it into one of the party members. And he's like, "Oh, that must be the cure." So he just injects it into himself despite the fact that he hasn't been sick. Nope, he just turned himself into a zombie.
I will do it.
Awesome. That's why you don't go around grabbing random needles from people, guys. If you take anything from this podcast, take that bit of information.
That is also where I made my biggest mistake as a DM, which is naming a character Simon. Don't ever do that.
Because Simon says?
Yeah. Because as a DM, you'll say, "Simon says," and they will not fucking stop with the jokes.
Oh, God. That's a valid point. I need to change the name of my character for this upcoming game, excuse me.
So, what's the biggest thing that you had to change when you started DMing for a game that was going to be for an audience?
Well, see, here's the thing. I started DMing. That's my first ever time playing and DMing was for the podcast. So it's really what I had to change when going to home games, which is that timing is something that I really want to stress. When playing, I don't really know how to say not podcast. When playing just a normal game of D&D, you don't have to worry about how long you go. You could play for 3 hours or 6 hours, or I know some people play for 12 hours, which is insane to me.
Yep.
Nikki is one of those people.
No, I've only gone to 8.
Okay, sorry.
It might have been 12, but it wasn't like we were playing the entire time. We had a dinner break. And usually by the end, we just delve into just random topics of conversation, and we stopped playing like 2 hours ago, and we're like, oh, we're still here.
But with a podcast, you gotta have a more rigid time structure, which you'll notice throughout my podcast is that we play for a lot longer than our episodes are. We'll play like 3 or 4 hours and cut that up into 3 or 4 episodes, which are an hour long. But we do cut those in, like, we do interrupt those sessions to do intros and recaps of what people might have missed on the last episode, which is a very important part because we air our episodes 2 weeks apart. So we can't just be like, all right, we're hopping right back into it. We gotta recap what happened on the last episode so that people are caught up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always good to have like just a really quick, maybe like minute, 2 minute at the beginning of your episode to be like, this is what happened just in case you missed it, or because it's been 2 weeks.
It's also real good to have everyone say their names right at the start. That's just a real good editing thing. That is so you could help balance everyone out audio-wise super quick. Which, on the latest episode 58, I must have fucked up because me and Chris are super quiet, but then the other two who are playing with us that day are super loud. So I fucked that up. But normally I don't do so bad of a job making sure that everyone sounds roughly on the same level. And that's just a really good tool for that, is just having everyone say their name right at the beginning. We usually go, hey, this is first name, and I play character, you know?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm actually going to be editing an episode for the first time this weekend. So
Usually I've been editing everything.
That's going to be something.
Yeah.
But since we're taking on more things with the one-shot TTRPG games and then the 5th edition actual play game, I figured it'd be helpful if I wasn't doing all of the editing by myself while working full-time.
Yeah, I did all of the editing for such a long time, and I'm way behind. Like I told you that we have 100-something episodes recorded, but I'm only like 4 or 5 episodes ahead editing-wise of where we are airing-wise.
I mean, that's still a bit of a backlog, which is always nice to have.
It is quite a bit of a backlog, but it still feels bad knowing that I still have at least 70 episodes that I need to edit.
Yeah, that's fair. So we have a question from Twitter. Prudence, or Proppy Pants.
Oh, yes, I saw there were a few of those.
Asks, how do you keep combat slick enjoyable for a viewership? And also timing, which you've mentioned. And how do you politely speed things up when individuals are taking a long time over their turn?
So that's a couple things. One, it is totally okay to fudge the numbers if something is going a long time. Like if the enemy is not quite dead yet, but like for the sake of the story, it makes sense for the enemy to be dead. It is totally okay to kill off an enemy. I luckily have never had to do that, but I've been close to doing that. That is totally okay for like speeding things up if you need to. For the most part, it is keeping the enemy numbers smaller than you might for a regular game, and it is keeping things more roleplay heavy rather than combat heavy. That helps.
That's fair. I know that with I've seen with some of the other shows that I've watched that they'll also do you're on deck and like tell the person who's next, like think about what you're going to do basically, so that it's a very streamlined situation and you're not just waiting till your turn to decide what you're going to do as a player. And that's how you can help as a player. Definitely. It's not just on the DM.
No, a lot of it could also come from the editing podcast or editing process when you're editing the episode and someone's taking a long time. You could just cut a lot of that out, which is why that is honestly why we have so many episodes that are like a little over 30 minutes. Is because it's a lot of combat, and a lot of it is just my friend Chris looking through the player's handbook to determine what spell he just cast does.
That's fair.
So a lot of that can be cut out in editing. But a lot of what I try and do is I try and keep other people talking while they're working through stuff, so that it's at least auditorily interesting to listen to, instead of just some dude going, this, I want to do this.
Okay, we have to cut that part.
Man, the amount of times I've cut myself going,
Oh god, yes. Greg and I both say so many times, and he's going to learn how many times he says when he edits this episode.
Oh, nothing makes you hate your own voice as much as editing a podcast.
I'm sure. I
Mhm.
100% believe that to be the case.
I just recommend with keeping it enjoyable for viewership, like you said, editing is definitely key. And I think that's one of the only reasons why it is enjoyable sometimes, but also describing what you're doing for the combat portion. Like, don't just say, I stab them. Explain what you're doing and how they're reacting to it. And obviously talk with your DM in discretion about this. If maybe your DM wants to be the one to describe it, maybe the players describe it. But it's so much cooler to say, as a monk, I rush up and I flip off of something and I punch him in the throat, and then I grab him and punch him in the spleen, like something like that, versus I punch him twice.
Yeah, and there are definitely moments where, like, depending on how they roll, either I will ask them to do like a better job describing what exactly they're doing to achieve this effect, or if they like critically fail, I go into detail about how exactly they fucked up.
Yeah. And I think that's fun either way. And and when the whole how do you want to do this and the killing blow thing, that's always a lot of fun too, to describe it and then give them a little bit more leeway, even though technically that's not how it's supposed to work. Like my monk, for example,
I mean,
is a
technically,
beast.
Dragonborns aren't allowed to have tails, but we play things loose around here.
Very true.
Right. So my monk has killed people by like snapping their necks, or by like, I can't list the other things that I've done because that's inappropriate.
Very nice.
She's done some stuff, but like the biggest one was like snapping their neck. That's not a move. I technically just punched them, but
Yeah,
that's way more fun to say I snapped their neck than to say I just punched them to death.
mechanically, you punched them. Narratively, you snapped their neck.
Right. I'm very curious to know what other stuff your monk has done, by the way. Message me after the podcast.
My character, Darius, has done some cool things that you're probably not allowed to do. Like, there's a time where he just charges in with his friend riding side saddle on his back, and at the same time, they both swing, decapitating two separate goblins in essentially one move. But that is because we got a surprise round, and the DM was just like, all right, I want you guys to just list out what you're going to do, and then we'll play it out as if it all happens at the same time.
It's always fun.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
So it's real great.
Monster Hunt Cass asks, how much story should you plan and how hard should you try to stick to it? And should it be more scripted, or can you play it more loose?
I need to think about what has aired real quick. Okay, yes. A Soul in 6-part has aired, I believe. I need to double check this. I'm headed over to Castbox, which is the only place you can find my podcast. I
will say that, personally, I would think that scripting slightly, but not to an extreme. Like, to a point where you have... the way I would personally do it, I'm not a DM, obviously, for an actual play game, but I would say have some points that you want to hit and have some spots that you would like to see, but let the players control where you go and how you get there, because they can change their mind pretty easily. You don't want to railroad them, and it can be pretty obvious when you are railroading them to a certain direction.
Oh, okay. Yes, I totally agree with that. So there are some days where I will go in not knowing what the fuck is going to happen as a DM, and just be like, all right, we're playing things loose. What do you guys want to do? But I will say, having an overarching story, like a big bad guy that you want, is a very important key element to have specifically for a narrative podcast that you want to start doing with your friends, is like having some key story beats that you want to play out, and letting your friends get there on their own, sure, but still kind of guiding them. I think you did a tips for DMs thing where you said the NPC they go to, that's the guy who gives them the quest.
Yep.
You guys said something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've been trying to do that. It's like, well, this is where you are. This is the person who's gonna tell you where to go to get to that next major story beat. And having like those story beats planned, but allowing for a wide array of freedom between them is very good. And then the reason I want to check for a soul in 6 parts, it is very important, like character-wise, to check in with your players and see what exactly they're okay with, because major spoiler alert for A Soul in 6 Parts, the arc in my podcast, A Soul in 6 Parts. My friend Mitch, his character Nick, discovered that his soul was broken into 6 parts, and he had to find all 6 of those parts of his soul, and then find the 7th piece of his soul to bind them together. And the 7th piece of his soul was the fact that he had a kid, but didn't know about it. Like, he didn't know he had a kid. I checked in with Mitch to make sure that was an okay thing to do for his character. I didn't want to just drop that on him, and if he had said, no, I don't want my character to have a kid, I would have been totally fine not doing that.
Yeah, double checking with your players for the things like that is definitely important.
For sure. Yeah. Session 0, like one of the first things we usually do aside from making characters is be like, what do you want to see in this game and what are you not okay with? Because the worst thing to do is to try to basically overstep one of your players' bounds as a DM and then make them upset or something.
Yeah, we definitely did that very early on. We're like, okay, where are our boundaries? And it helps that all of my D&D friends, like on my podcast, we've known each other from high school, which is not that long ago. We're all 20, 21, something like that. High school wasn't that long ago, but still, like, we'd known each other and we'd known our limits, essentially. So that was a very helpful thing. But yes, establishing clear, like, guidelines for what is and what isn't okay is very important. And I would say that's especially important for a podcast where you might not know who's going to be listening.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Also, I did something like that in my game on Monday where I specifically pulled aside one player and said, here's my idea. Well, technically I said, would you have done this? Which was, would you sell information to the family that you work for closer to than the family that the rest of your party works with?
Yes, I remember you talking about this on an earlier episode of your.
Right. So I got their permission. They're like, yeah, sure. I'm like, okay. Would you kill for them? Like, yeah, okay. You're probably the bad guy today. Just so you know, your goal is to not be caught. You good with that? Yep. Let's go.
It is so fun making a player character the bad guy. I've done that for a couple games I did. Or making their beloved NPCs also secretly the bad guy. I did.
Oh, that's so mean.
I did a Ruby RPG. I don't know if you guys know what Ruby is. It's an animated show.
Yeah, RWBY. Yeah.
I'm part of a group of friends who enjoy that show, so I ended up DMing a thing set in the universe, and there was this character. I think her name was Lilac. And one of the other characters was like flirting with her, and they're becoming friends. And I was slowly dropping hints that they were part of a secret society that tortured Grimm to try and discover their weaknesses. Which is like Grimm don't have emotions and whatnot, but it's still super cruel and kind of inhumane.
Oh, for sure.
That's kind of the moral question there. It's like Grimm are beings of pure evil, and this will give you good information against stopping them. But like, morally, is this okay? That was the big question there. We did not get much farther into that because it was absolutely bombarded with shipping, which is a thing that can happen.
Oh, God. Yeah, I can only imagine.
I know that Grace played the bad guy now twice, but neither of them were purposely.
Well, no, the original, the first time we did that when I was playing Glory, you
weren't a bad guy specifically in your own way. Like, you weren't hiding something. You had like a command word or a trigger word or something. Right?
Yeah, it was a phrase that my wife and I decided on, like, before we even started the campaign, where basically we would get to the final bad guy of the campaign. He would be almost defeated, say the trigger phrase, and then my character would spaz out basically and transform, and then I became the final boss of the campaign, which was super fun and super cool. Sadly, didn't really it wasn't as climactic as I had wanted because I went down pretty quickly, but it was still super.
There's nothing more embarrassing for a DM than to have the main bad guy wiped in one round of combat.
I think that's basically what happened. Yeah. Like, I went invisible and then I just died.
Rock literally fell.
That's what it was. Yeah, there was a cave in.
There was a moment where I fucking rolled for initiative for one of the main bad guys. Rolled a natural 1, and I was like, well, he's not gonna get a turn.
That's not fun either.
Spent the entire last 10 minutes
Well, this was fun. Cool.
soliloquying about this dude's fucking motives and whatnot, and then all of a sudden he's like, all right, now beat on me for the next 2 seconds, and then I'll go die in a ditch.
My Friday game has done that a couple of times where the DM's just like, you weren't supposed to kill that easily. But there have been games where she got payback, like our last game where my character almost died like 3 times. And now they're just like, what have you learned? I'm like, probably nothing.
But yeah, it is very important to establish with your players some of the story beats that they're okay with incorporating for their characters. Not all of them, of course. It's still fun to surprise them, but it is still very important for like major character changing things, I think, to okay with them sometimes.
Definitely.
Like, I didn't want to just drop on Mitch the fact that his character had a kid.
Surprise. Mostly in our games.
I thought I was still a virgin this whole time.
I'm also going to share with you my favorite thing from that. I'm going to send it to your Discord, and you can cut this part out of the podcast.
Okay.
Because I'm looking at it right now, and there's the bonus clip "That's Not Good," which is a supercut of all the times I, as the DM, responded, "Well, that's no good," when he told people that his soul was broken into 6 parts, because that doesn't feel like a thing you just tell everyone you meet.
Nope.
Yeah, that's not an icebreaker. In this case, I guess it's a soul breaker. But
I'm just gonna send that to your Discord right now. I'll link to that.
Well, that's not good. Well, that's not good. Well, that's not good. Well, that's not good. Well, that's not good.
We're keeping that part in. That's a joke that we're keeping in. Damn it.
That's not good supercut. It was so good.
Nice.
Every single time he was like, "Well, my soul's broken into 6 parts," and I was just like, "Well, that's not good. How can I help?" I did that with like 6 NPCs, one of which is their favorite NPC, the Goblin Spool.
Yeah, that's probably gonna be well shit or something like that from one of our games. It's like, fuck, I didn't mean to do that.
That phrase, well shit, is so ingrained in BioWare culture for me. Like Dragon Age culture specifically. There's so much a saying from that game to me. But yeah, I think despite the tangent, we've satisfyingly answered that question.
Yes, I believe so.
The next question, this is from the First Watch D&D web series.
Yes, they're very good.
What are some ways you balance theater of the mind with having visual aids for your players, knowing that the final product will be audio only?
I think I've addressed this pretty early on in that I don't have visual aids for my players because we only play audio only.
Well, we did discuss it a little, or we discussed it earlier, but if you are using visual aids, my suggestion would be to make sure you have descriptors on what people are seeing. So instead of saying, I moved 25 feet over there, say, I moved 25 feet to that tree or to the closest tree line. I moved to where I'm within 15 feet of the enemy so that I can see them, like emphasize where you're going in the actual visual version so that people who are listening can know what's happening.
That is something that we still struggle with, even with our long range, like long distance playstyle. And that is something like, even in the first few episodes where we did meet up, you notice, like, we'll just point at each other and say, you,
yep,
and not say who we're talking to, which could be real annoying to edit, because then I don't know who the hell they're talking to, because it's been 3 weeks since we recorded that episode.
Yeah, it's just being more descriptive.
And then another big problem for us at that time, and still sometimes now, since we have the dice rolling bot and we can all see what we roll, is that we just won't say what number was rolled.
Yep.
Which is why I'm so glad that we've since moved to actual dice, which does allow for lying, but it does at least force us to say a number.
That's fair.
Yeah, I think with the game when we play it, we are using Discord to record, but we're using Roll20 for the maps only. Like, we're not using it for anything else, just for the maps. And that way we can all see where we are supposed to be. And honestly, I personally really did want maps, because I'm one of those people that I will ask you a dozen times every single time it's my turn, where's the bad guys again? Are they within 5 feet of each other? Do I get sneak attack? Like, I'd ask the same questions, and that's not interesting for anybody.
It is good, though, for an audio medium, because that type of stuff can get edited out if it's being overly repeated. But if it's not being overly repeated, it's good to at least have it in there,
Right.
where you are asking these questions, and the DM has to constantly give answers, which allows the audience to constantly update their mental picture of the scene.
I would much rather,
That's
like,
true.
for the instances of that situation, I would much rather say, okay, there's 2 people right next to each other within 60 feet. I'm going to shoot the first one twice and then shoot the second one the third time because of my horde breaker. And then I'm still explaining it, but I don't have to ask, do I get sneak attack? Do I get this? Do I get that? For me, it was frustrating because I was doing it in a play-by-post setting when I had this issue, and they refused to make a map. And people kept moving, and I'm like, okay, once again, what is happening on this field? There's like 100 messages since my last turn.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you just find a balance that works for you.
Yeah.
That as generic as that advice sounds, sometimes it's just how it is you gotta find a balance that works for you between theatrics and practicality when it comes to explaining this like the scene to both the players and the audience, where the players need to mechanically know where everything is, but the audience doesn't want to listen to exact details, like nitty-gritty.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I'm very much in the same vein as Nikki when it comes to actually playing like Dungeons and Dragons or any TTRPGs or anything like that. I definitely prefer to have some kind of a map or something in front of me so that I can keep track of where I am and all this other stuff. I've tried in the past. I think we did during my Curse of Strahd campaign that I was running. I think I had like one session where I was being lazy and just didn't want to draw out a map, although we were having combat. So I just had everything going in my head, and it was so difficult to try to keep everything in place where it was like when the last person stopped going, now it's this person's turn. That obviously the enemy didn't move anywhere, but I don't have any visual medium in order to signify that to myself. So I don't like stuff jumped around all the time that it really shouldn't have and stuff like that. So it's much easier to have a visual thing.
My thing is like that way people can pre-plan too. If I have to wait for a DM to explain to me the map again, then I'm not preparing for my turn. I'm like, okay, well, if I'm within 60 feet, then this. If I'm within 120 feet, then this. But if I'm within 5 feet, then this. Then that's just not really fair. And I might have to change it.
And again, this does fall into the different play styles, which are all totally valid. There's absolutely nothing wrong with being a player or being a DM who runs a campaign with players who don't mind, where there's not really a map and all the numbers are just kind of like, am I within 60 feet of this guy? And then the DM thinks for a second, like, yeah, I think you would be.
Yeah,
which is a lot of how my podcast
as
works.
Long as the players are happy and the DM is happy, then it doesn't matter. If you want to do theater of mind without any audio or any visual aids, go for it. If you want a very distinct descript map, go for it. Do whatever makes you happy.
And I would recommend anyone who's considering just starting a Dungeons and Dragons podcast, one, consider all of the like stuff I've said throughout this in the distinct differences between that and real-time play. But like, I would just play Dungeons and Dragons first. Don't do what I did, which is just start by recording a podcast. But I didn't really have a choice, because when we created the Discord group for our D&D group, and the dude named it 4 Nerds and a DM, I was like, that's too good of a name to pass up not doing a podcast.
That's very fair. It's a very good name. I was actually gonna be like, wow, that's really crazy that you started as an actual play DM without any like previous experience whatsoever. Or no, you do have experience, you said.
No, my first time ever playing was Darius Deer's End on the podcast. My first time ever DMing. Yeah. But I've since played outside of that.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It is kind of a bizarre way to get your start into tabletop role-playing games, and I would definitely recommend going about it not this way.
I mean, I've been playing for 17 years, and I have been DMing for 7, and I'm still not comfortable with DMing for an actual play. Like, the first thing when I mentioned, hey, I want to do an actual play, was, not it for DMing.
I want to do an actual play game, but who wants to DM it?
Pretty much.
See, it was very much the opposite for me, which was when we were setting up, like for us to just play Dungeons and Dragons, which is what it was initially. It was definitely we're not planning on being a podcast until the dude had written that name as the name of our Discord server, which is why we're called 4 Nerds and a DM, by the way, when we have more than 4 nerds and a DM. Like
Nice.
We've got like 6 players. Or 6.
You didn't want to change the Discord server name?
Well, 6NAD doesn't roll off the tongue as well as 4NAD does, I think.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. That's very fair.
It's like we're 4 nerds in a DM, but we're not 4 people.
Actually,
I mean, that's kind of like the Mighty 9 from Critical Role. There's not 9 people.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at in my own head here.
But yeah, like if you listen to the first episode, we're like, there's not actually 4 of us.
Don't get it confused.
But yeah, it was just too good of a name to pass up not doing it. So that's when we started. But I am a writer, like a novelist. I'm trying to publish a novel. I'm trying to finish writing a novel so I can start trying to publish a novel, which is why I prefer calling myself a writer and not an author or a novelist. But
I would say ditto, but I have so many unfinished pieces that it's not true.
I have been working on the same story for 13 years, so yeah.
I've never written anything, and I can barely read.
That's not true. You wrote the thing for our telephone game.
Okay.
Because all my friends knew I was like quite a good storyteller, I was the shoo-in for the DM from day one. But Stormy really wanted to try DMing, which is why he created a player character and still DM'd, is because after the first arc, I was supposed to take over, but he got tired of all the like complaining, which comes with being a DM. Your players complain.
Mm-hmm.
And he got tired of it real quick, which is why I take over at episode 9, which is like halfway, not even, it's a little over halfway through the first arc.
Yeah, that's fair. Greg and I usually play with his wife, which is my best friend, and then my husband. And then occasionally we have other people join, either their roommates or some mutual friends. So it was always 3 people. And at first, I was the only one with DM experience. So I think I DM'd the first couple of times we played. But then Ashley took up the mantle, and then Greg tried it, and then my husband tried it. So everybody tried it a little bit, and now I haven't DM'd for the group in like 2+ years, which is nice.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
But
yeah, I think it's too ingrained in me to DM for now, because I believe I've already said that I'm not DMing the current campaign we're recording for our podcast, which is still like a year and a half out.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like major, like, don't expect this anytime soon. But I'm already planning for the next campaign that I'll be DMing, which I'm super excited for. I'm not going to get into any details about that because
it's like
that is
3 years out
several years away. Yeah.
In 3 years, I'm DMing another game. I keep taking on games to run them, and I enjoy the games where, as long as I have a steady group. My issue, for me at least, and the thing that discourages me when I DM, is when people join and then leave. And it's not specifically because of my DMing style, but like they never show up or they just don't make it a priority. So that was always my hardest part with DMing. Once I find a group that sticks and shows up every week within reason, because this shit happens, which took me a while for the Monday game. I almost dropped it completely because people kept not showing up.
We have a saying over at 4NAD, which is that everything is more important than Dungeons and Dragons. So if you have like any reason to not show up for a game, we're pretty chill about it. I will say that like recently I've been starting to feel that like exact thing where like 3 of our people have just not been able to show up recently. And like it's through no fault of their own. Like the world's in shambles right now. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I get that real life comes up, but as long as I get notice, then it doesn't bother me. It's when I don't get notice and it's 7 p.m. and we're supposed to start, And I'm like messaging them like, hey, where are you? Game started 10 minutes ago. Oh, shit, I'm at dinner. Oh, shit, I'm on vacation. I didn't tell you. Those are the things that bother me. Or they just don't respond, period, and they never respond again. As long as I know ahead of time, then I'm usually can be like, oh, okay, cool, that sucks, but whatever. And I can like plan something else maybe, and we can still play or discuss if we want to cancel. But if it's just like last minute, that's when it hits every pet peeve of mine.
Yeah. My friend Casey has a problem with that specifically, not showing up without notification. But she's probably like the only exception I would have to that. Because of all of my friends who I played D&D with, who I knew at high school, she's the only one who went to college and is like at college.
Yeah.
So like that's a very valid reason to have shit popping up last minute, and you don't have time to explain it to your D&D friends.
Yeah, as long as
Oh, for sure.
if there's a situation like that, then I could understand it. Like, hey, there is occasionally might be a time where I can't make it because finals or because this or because homework or whatever. That I can understand, like, okay, hit or miss. I just won't expect them to be here, and then we'll be great. If they're here, yay. If they're not, meh. When it's like 3 of the 4, then it's like, no.
Yeah, it's a little disheartening, but like you said, I mean, life comes up, and it is always nice to if you're in a situation like that to let your DM know, hey, I can't make it because of X, Y, Z. Don't just leave it to last minute.
As a DM, I can definitely say that is the right call. You will not be upsetting anyone by saying I can't make it to D&D at this time. You will be upsetting people by just not showing up to D&D.
Yes.
I don't know. I feel like I've gotten some pretty angry messages from Nikki once or twice.
No. They weren't angry.
Oh.
They were very disappointed.
Oh.
Though I was probably
Thanks, Mom.
bitchy, so they came off as angry.
That might have been it too. I honestly don't know. I just assume you're always being bitchy when you message me, so
That's probably a fair assumption.
I need to readjust my headphones. Hold on. There we go. Sorry. I have a weird shaped head and they just start sliding backwards.
So
all
last
good,
question
buddy.
from
All
Twitter. Kyle Wear a Mask Wagner, or Mr. Bakudan. He said, how much pregame prep do you do?
So early on I did a lot more than I do towards the end. But that's because towards the end I had more pregame stuff just overall already established.
That's fair.
Like I knew what was going to happen for the next 2 episodes, essentially, and I knew what the overarching story was and how I wanted to get them there, and they threw me for a loop quite a few times. The Revolution of Neverwinter ended with Galvin becoming king. I didn't expect that. They were just supposed to pick a faction and stick with it. No. They're just like, fuck it, we're our own faction now.
That's exactly what I was about to say. That's awesome.
Like, I gave them 2 clear factions. I was like, these people were like, they overthrew the king, and then 2 factions split from this rebellion, and like one's led by the husband and the other's led by the wife, and they're trying to decide which one of them should be the ruler. So like things got messy, and fucking they're like, well, we don't know who either of those people are. We know that Galvin is from Neverwinter. Let's just make him king.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, they do throw you for a loop sometimes, but even then, you got to roll with the punches. And
absolutely, that's one of my favorite things in D&D is when my players back me into a corner, and I'm like, this happens.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. I've gotten a lot better at predicting their movements, essentially. Knowing how they're going to react to things, I've gotten a lot better at that, but it's still very like hit or miss when you set something up, whether or not that's going to pay off. So,
is there any last minute advice that you can offer to DMs in general or DMs for actual play?
Okay, so this is more just for content creators, and like being who I am, which is a cis white male, like representation is very important to people of minorities and the LGBTQ community. So, and I wish I had done a better job of including those types of characters in my stories. So if you're thinking of creating any sort of content, whether that be an actual play podcast or just a D&D thing for your friends, or hell, like writing a book or doing some like art or whatever, it is very important to make sure those people feel included and recognized by you and your creations.
Ironically, we did bring that up in our prior episode as well about inclusivity and making sure to.
Oh, I did not see
that.
Oh,
it was recorded
yeah.
today. It hasn't been posted yet.
Oh,
So
well.
It came up in conversation, and we were talking about world building, and it came up with inclusivity and making sure you have people like that too. So it's like a super important topic right now, though. So I completely agree.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first characters I ever introduced as the DM of my podcast is a bisexual. Greg, I already mentioned him. He's the bisexual bandit, as they've come to call him, and
That's quite a title.
It is quite a title.
I approve.
He's the goddamn saddest character I've ever made, but that has not come to air yet. So I encourage you guys to get into my podcast so you can see the tragic story of Greg.
No, that's
but
my
like
life.
very very early on, it was not clear what his sexuality or his identity was as a character, and I regret that. I regret not making it clearer sooner. It wasn't until my friend Casey's brother played him while he was a guest on the show that he started to flirt with like a dude, and that's where that became a major aspect of his character, is that he likes to flirt with pretty much anybody.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the most recent episode of my podcast, or one of the recent episodes, they went and rescued him, but he wasn't like in danger or at all or anything. They just wanted to get him back into the party because he had left the group to like do his own thing. And they went to his house and knocked on the door, and another like random dude opened the door. And then they're like, "Who are you?" And it took them like 10 minutes to get what was going on.
Very nice.
Some good advice.
But yeah, I think inclusivity and like not just being like in retrospect and just like announcing on like a different platform, just being like, "Hey, this character is like gay, by the way." Like making it known in context of the universe is very important as well, not just afterwards or on the side.
Very true. Where can people find you? So that's at 4nad, or 4 nerds in a DM.
Yes. On Twitter, you can follow us at 4nad_podcast. If you want to follow me personally, it's at 4nerds and me. That is the number 4 in both 4nad and 4nerds and me. And then if you want to listen to our podcast, because we're only found in one place, that's castbox.fm. We are 4nad podcast, or just 4nad. We shouldn't be too hard to find. We've got like 14 subscribers and 500 something listens. So I'm really blessed that I have the chance to talk on this show, which is probably a lot bigger than mine.
No, not much.
You
bigger.
give us way too much credit, my friend.
I appreciate it though. We just hit 600 downloads.
Yeah, I don't keep track of uploads, which means I do not get accurate statistics. So
Love the
I don't know where exactly we're at.
Oh no, we're actually only at 600. All right, this episode, I don't want to be on this episode anymore. Let's go ahead and edit everything out.
No,
I'm no longer interested. Bye-bye.
I really did not volunteer because I thought this would be a good opportunity for me.
No,
I know.
Honestly, I think like a fourth of the people who will listen to this will even know what Castbox is. Like, I do not think this is a great opportunity for expanding my networking, but I did just think this was a fun show and I wanted to be on it. So
Hey, that works.
I volunteered. And I'll keep listening to this show, and I'll keep an ear out for that actual play podcast to see if you guys take any of my advice.
We take none of it. No.
Not whatsoever.
Everyone's straight and white. And
Aryan or
we don't say any of the numbers. We just say, yeah, that works and stuff like that.
I totally hit, guys. What'd you roll? I don't remember. I just hit.
Here's just like, oh yeah, that hits. You don't even like say the number. You can just see it on your screen. So you're like, oh yeah, that hits.
Not even 100% sure what we're attacking at this point.
What are you attacking? I don't know. I'm sure there's something for
There's
me
got
to
to be
punch.
something around that tree over there.
I punched the tree. It's a treant.
TPK.
Pretty much. Thank you for joining. This was a lot of fun. Everybody go check out 4nad. They are the first episode I thought was hilarious. So definitely listen to more. as it was said, Riley said, it gets better. So that means
it most certainly gets a lot better than it does. And then it kind of dips and gets worse because we started meeting up again for a minute at the beginning of the Revolution of Neverwinter, but it gets better after that.
just go with the downs and the ups. So check us out.
Just go with it. It's pretty good.
So check them out, and then check us up on Twitter at Beholder to No One and Facebook at Beholder to No One. And you can listen to our podcast wherever podcasts are listened to. Last Thursday was when our first TTRPG episode came out. So please go check that out. It's for Magic School Mysteries.
Oh, I listened to your guys' episode about that. That sounds very interesting. I'll be sure to check that out.
It was a lot of fun. I had a blast playing that game.
Pretty much. And we will be having we just had our actual play first session 0. So we are super excited about that. So more information will be coming out once we have it. And look forward to on the 27th, our TTRPG one shot of World of Wildriver. So lots coming up. But yeah, that's it for us. So thanks for joining. Bye.
Bye-bye.